It's 3 o'clock here in Belgium, so let's get going. I'd like to start by wishing everyone a good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where in the world you are. It's another global audience, so thank you for taking the time out of your day to join our webinar with Spire Aviation entitled Beyond Flight Tracking, How Global Air Traffic Data and Interactive Analytics Fuel Business Insights. First, I'd like to introduce you to our speakers and get to know them a little bit better. First of all, up in the top left is Bart Adams. Bart is the founder and CTO of xyzt.ai and has held senior leadership positions at Luciad and Hexagon, where he was the product management director and chief innovation officer. Bart holds a PhD computer science from the KU Leuven and a postdoc from Stanford University. Next on the right, we have Shai Harnoy. Shai is the General Manager for Spire Aviation's division and is responsible for applying Spire's satellite-based data, insights and analytics to both existing and new use cases within the aviation industry. Prior to Spire, Shai most recently served as leader on the Uber Maps product team and is Uber Boulder site lead. Then we have Philip Plantholt. Philip serves as the Head of Strategy and Business Development for Spire's Aviation Division. Prior to joining the Spire team, Philip served as the VP of Commercial Services for Flight Radar 24 and was instrumental in setting up and growing the business from the outset in 2013. And last but not least, me, Joe Threlfall. I'm the Director of Marketing and Partnerships at xyzt.ai and I'll be your moderator today. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Shai and Philip again for being with us today. It's really much appreciated. Bart will go over the agenda with you shortly, but before that we get started, a few points to mention. For some interactivity, we'll be asking your opinion on a few different hypotheses that we'll be discussing during the webinar. If you have any thoughts, comments or questions about the topic that you would like to put to the team, let us know and add them to the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. If you have any questions about anything else during the webinar, please also ask them via the Q&A box or in the chat area. We'll try to answer them, as many of them as we can, time permitting, and depending on how many, if we don't get round to all of them, we'll provide answers to your questions directly via email. And of course, the webinar is recorded and will be shared with you as soon as possible after the event. So now, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Bart.
Okay, thank you, Joe. And thank you, Shai and Philip, for joining us, and thank you, Spire, for being with us today, and thank you all for joining this exciting webinar. We're not going to follow a traditional webinar format. We're going to make it more like a discussion on different topics, and we will be showing some data sets and some analytics on the way. And there we're going to use a really nice data set about the 4-engine wide-body aircraft traffic over the past year and a half even, which of course we all know is severely impacted by the whole COVID pandemic. As Joe said, we're going to bring up a few hypotheses and we're going to ask your opinion on them. And then we're going to go into a discussion and also a live demo of the data and the platform that we will be using. And the whole discussion is around the topic that air traffic data is not just for aviation specialists anymore. It can bring business insights outside of the aviation industry, and that's what we're gonna talk about. And of course, at the end, we have plenty of time for additional questions. So please don't hesitate to bring them up. First, just one slide about ourselves, about the company. We founded xyzt.ai about a year and a half ago, and really with the goal to bring a software as a service platform to market that can be used by anyone to analyze large amounts of location-related data. And more specifically, we really focus on data that comes from tracking things, tracking aircraft, tracking vessels, and so on. It scales really to billions of records, which we will see is really necessary to look into this type of data. And it's a web-based SaaS platform, and you can just start it from day one. XYZ, of course, stands for 3D coordinates, T for time, and AI for artificial intelligence. With these few words, and I will show the platform later on, I would like to hand over to Shai, who's going to say a few words about Spire Aviation first. And Shai, we don't hear you, I think. It doesn't look like you're muted. It looks like the microphone is not passing the sound, at least on my side. Okay, All right.
I can step in until Shai gets the microphone sorted. So yeah,
Can you guys
super
hear me?
excited to. Yes.
There you go.
Sorry about. Wow. So we can speak to each other across the seas and the oceans, but we can't turn on our microphones. So thank you, Zoom, for adding an extra Zoom functionality to keep us all safe. Good morning from a dark Boulder, Colorado here, where it's early in the morning, but I'm looking at the list here and I have a diverse group of folks from around the world joining. I think what's bringing us together isn't necessarily aviation or isn't necessarily visualization. It's understanding our data, understanding the volume, the velocity, the variety, the veracity that makes up big data and allows us to extract value from it. So at Spire, we design, build, own, and operate. We do everything other than launch, where we have great launch partners, 100 plus satellites in space, 35 of them or so are collecting data about aircraft. These satellites are constantly orbiting the globe from pole to pole or in various orbits around the globe. Now, just I'm going to pause for a second and say a couple of words on satellite orbits. One of the things that's fascinating about it is that they're kind of falling through space. Think about it. The way it works is there's definitely gravity around the Earth. These satellites are flying at about 24,000 kilometers an hour, falling towards the Earth, being pulled down by Earth's gravity, but they just keep missing it and going around and around and around. This allows you an amazing vantage point. They don't care about borders. They don't care about politics. They don't care about who won the Germany elections 2 days ago. They're orbiting, collecting data, sensing, observing features we're tasking them to do. So every day, we observe about 150,000 flights around the world, whether they're over the ocean, whether they're over seas, remote areas, mountains, it doesn't really matter. We use a combination of both satellite data from these 35 plus ADS-B satellites as well as terrestrial data. So these are ground-based receivers, largely around population centers to help augment the data. We conflate them together and have it available in a single API. And the data streams down at an incredible pace. What this allows us to do is then have near real-time tracking around the world of aircraft. At Spire, we also have a Spire Maritime where we do it for vessels. We also are able to measure weather using this constellation of small satellites. So on the next slide, let's talk about what's in those data packets. So obviously it's the breadcrumbs of position. So that's XYZT, the latitude, longitude, and altitude, which is, you can see why Bart and I geek out pretty well. There's a great overlap. But there's also the vertical rate, the speed. We augment the API and the information with aircraft data. So the tail number, who the owner is, who the operator is, what the flight schedule is, what the call sign is. It's a pretty rich amount of data. And what we're trying to do is to make it as useful and as simple to use as possible. And so I think in the rest of this webinar, we're going to talk about some of these hypotheses that'll kind of tease out what's locked inside the data and how we can make sense of it.
Yeah, thank you, Shai. And yeah, true. And maybe we can just start with the first hypothesis. Maybe we're stating the obvious or maybe not. But Joe, we would like to get some input, no?
Yeah, indeed. So hypothesis one, aviation data is complex. I'll bring up the question here. So if you could make your choice of either agree, don't agree, or not sure. Okay, some answers still coming in, so another couple of seconds. Okay, there's still one or two coming in. All right, great. Thank you for your answers. So I'm going to end the poll there. Let me share the results with you. And see, 43% don't agree.
It's a good one. So yeah, I don't know, Philippe or Shai, if you have a view on it. I've been in the aviation industry on the sideline a bit for the last 10 years and working with complex data sources like AXM5 and so on and so forth. But in this case, we're talking about air tracking data. I think you mentioned a couple of things that I think are interesting to go into is, for example, you mentioned it's not only satellite, but also terrestrial data, which you fuse basically, I think, in one data source. So that I think helps. And you also mentioned APIs. So maybe that's something that you could go into, that it's quite easy now to get your hands on the data.
So I think aviation in general, I mean, these planes are ridiculously complex as far as the sensors that they have on board. They're conveying so much interesting information about engine status, about all sorts of variables affecting the flight and the safety of the aircraft. And so it's our job to kind of receive some of that and to make it accessible to people who aren't on the aircraft, and to make it into something useful. So I think aviation data is very complex. I think if we do our jobs right, we can at least make positional data, ownership data, and some of the data that you can make decisions based off of, we can make that more simple.
Yeah, true. Philip, you've been in the business also of the terrestrial receivers before, and now you have the satellite data as well combined.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. No, absolutely. It's a very complex data set, and I think there are some primary use cases where I think it's important to strip down some of the complexities, and then there's some more involved use cases where it's super important to have the extreme high complex data presented in the right way. Like, I think to have the longitude latitude point of the aircraft and the speed of the aircraft, and to identify the aircraft, the owner, the operator, on which route it is, that's core. With this will unlock an enormous amount of use cases. But then obviously there are things like quality indicator about how strong the GPS position was the aircraft was receiving, or the aircraft sends out anti-collision resolutions when aircraft get too close. And obviously there are extreme subject matter domains which would require that to really unlock new procedures to evaluate past conflicts. And this is the fun thing with that data source, that it's really like, from make it simple to make it extreme down to a super precise use case.
So what did you vote? Do you need to take a stand here? Did you vote not sure? Did you vote, is it for industry experts only?
Yeah, I think I was one of the unsures. It really depends from which direction you look at it. And like, I think my experience has been, it's a lot of customer education from the start. Where does that data come from? And what can the data really tell me? And like, where is actually my use case for that data? Yep. And I think it's super important to have platforms where that can be more intuitive, instead of like, here is the 700-page manual for our data product. This is this world we are not living in anymore. So I think that's the way to go, like to really build the platforms for the particular use cases, help people to give them pre-studies on the data so they know what the data can tell them.
Cool. Shall we make it maybe a bit more concrete for the audience?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's go to the next one, and then maybe we can show some of the data also, and some of the analytics we can do on the data. So here, the second hypothesis, Joe.
Yeah, so the disappearance of wide-body aircraft. Question is, 4-engine wide-body aircraft such as the A380 will disappear. Do you agree, don't agree, or are you not sure?
Didn't they just get released?
It did, yeah. So by the way, on the picture you see an A380 here, one of the big ones. I think it can seat around 800 people.
Yeah. I've flown on it many times. It's a great aircraft, but this one is splitting opinion a bit.
The Emirates version has 2 showers, I think. That's definitely not the one with the high density configuration of 800 seats.
Okay,
Never got the chance to use that though.
I'm going to end the poll here. Let me share the results with you. So 38% agree, 48% don't agree, and 14 are not sure.
Right.
What are you guys' thoughts on that?
I'm becoming more and more an unsure person. You know, since the pandemic started, everyone was trashing A380s, 747s, like, as absolutely not fit for the future anymore. But what happens is the demand is coming back, and in certain markets, it kind of, you know, China, pre-COVID plus levels. Like, yeah, on trunk routes like Beijing and other major cities like Shanghai, you might want to have a bus shuttle service where you go every hour with an A380. However, I think overall we will see less of them as they're also, like, obviously in the economic environmental discussion, don't play the best role.
Shall we have a look at the data maybe and see how that looks like? Because this is the data set we extracted for this webinar and put in our platform. So what I'm going to do is, and I hope you can see my screen well, I'm going to log into the platform and I'm going to show you the data. So we prepared a small project here with a couple data sets in there. And basically, I want to guide you a little bit through the platform also while doing so, and I'll keep it short for sure. So that basically what the xyzt.ai platform allows you to do is ingest lots and lots of location data, so hundreds of millions or even billions of data points. And then we can visualize them in different ways. And as Shai explained, there's like the spatial component, there's a temporal component, but then there's also all those different numbers, like which airline, which flight number is it. And so we all take all of this data into account, we compress it very efficiently so that you can look at the data in a very interactive, intuitive way. So basically what you see on the map is just a plain heat map going from dark blue to white, showing the density of the air traffic. Here at the bottom, you see a histogram counting the number of flights over time, and you already immediately see from the shape of the histogram that there's like a huge drop here around the end of March. As you can all expect, of course. And then here on the right, you see a summary on the statistics of what is in the view. So basically, we're looking at the travels of 418 wide-body aircraft during a period of a year and a half. And here you see the distribution. So you see like the A380 has been quite active in this period. And what we really try to focus on with our platform is to make the data really interactive. Instead of having to crunch numbers overnight, you can just apply filters on the data. So for example, I can filter here time and focus maybe on the beginning of 2020 when life was still as before. But then I can just shift my time slider to a period later and I can immediately see what is happening. So, and this is called interactive visual analytics. It allows you in a very visual way to see what the data is about. So you can filter on the data in space, in time, and also on attributes. And of course, you can also style the data. So for example, I could look at different aircraft types. I could look at different airlines. So maybe let's look at different airlines. And then it's going to color those airlines with different colors so that you can intuitively immediately see where the most active ones and so on. So for example, here you see in this period, during COVID, if I now change my slider back to before COVID, you see a huge difference in activity. And we do that at different scales. And that's really what makes it super interesting to do analysis. You can do it at a global scale, but you can also do it at a very local scale. So for example, if I would zoom in on a hotspot, you would see that we refine sort of the resolution of the analysis to a scale that is corresponding to what you are viewing. So for example, here, if I focus on London Heathrow, I can zoom in on London Heathrow, maybe make the background a little bit darker to see what the data is about. And then I could, for example, go back maybe to the airline styling, and then I could see, okay, what is happening around London Heathrow before COVID, and then maybe during COVID. And you see immediately just by switching the time slider, you see there's a huge impact and a huge decline in this wide-body aircraft activity. And the platform allows you to go into many details, and I'll do that later in the webinar also with different analytics we support and different filters you can set. But one really nice one is, for example, to just do a split view analysis and just compare two different time periods. So now we're comparing before COVID broke out, and then this is during the COVID, and then you see the decline. And
is this just A380s? This is just A380s, or is this all aircraft?
A380s and also the Boeing 747. So yeah, cool. It's a good question. So let me switch here to aircraft type. For example, you see here the A380 is the most active after the during the pandemic in this region. Before you also see a lot of activity there. But you see, like, switching here my slider also to the same period as on the left, you will see like there's like a clear divide between Airbus going east and Boeing going west, basically. That's like the majority of air traffic that you see. And that you can do like different scales, focusing on one airport or focusing on multiple airports, but I'll show that later. So to come back to maybe the hypothesis, the data tells us that there's a huge decline. Is it going to stay like that, or is it not going to stay like that? That's a big question. One thing I noticed, and maybe I can show that still in the platform to bring up the discussion again, is I put a filter on, and I bookmarked it so I can go back to it, on Atlas Air. And Atlas Air has a completely different profile than all the others. So this is like the profile of activity from beginning of January 2020 until June. And you see also from the heat map, there's a lot of activity. Any insights, maybe Philip, from you or Shai on Atlas Air? Why they
this
so
is
different?
a great example to see what maybe not everyone would have obviously seen in the data at first glance, that an airline like Atlas Air, which operates predominantly main deck freighter aircrafts, has obviously had a way higher aircraft utilization suddenly, and could like pick and choose whatever customer they want to serve at the highest price, considering that the huge drop of overall aircraft activity had obviously hit the cargo industry hard by having the belly capacity as one of the kind of main drivers for air cargo. And suddenly it took a while until a lot of airlines then realized that and started to even kind of, build main deck out of passenger aircrafts. And it's interesting to then be able to follow, like, where are the trends? Where do they fly in those type of times? Like, where are the most demands, because they would obviously jump on them. And that's obviously something which is a great use case for the data, to be able to like find the demands in uncertain times.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think it brings us to the next hypothesis. Unless Shai, you want to say something still about the first one?
No, so I mean, the data is showing us that these wide body aircraft are going to all be converted to cargo planes.
Most likely.
Or at least if we were to hypothesize, or that's a trend in the. I wanted to say in the late stages of the pandemic, but I actually don't know that. It might be the early stages of the pandemic, at least today.
All right.
And we should invest in a company which does aircraft conversion.
Yeah, there you go.
Alrighty. Yeah, it brings us to the second one. We had the demo, so this I think actually this is the third hypothesis already, Joe.
Yes, indeed. So this one is about predicting the economics. Aviation data can be used to analyze and predict economic trends. Do you agree, don't agree, or you're not sure? Let me just launch that now. That was a hot tip there from you as well, Philip, I think.
Maybe like playing the devil's advocate, I can, like, there's maybe two ways to look at this. Also, like, if you think about aviation and the aviation industry, it's only like what 3 to 5% of the GDP in the US, something like that. So does it have an impact? Can we look just at 3 to 5% and predict? On the other hand, there's so many derived parts of the economy that depend on aviation. So yeah, can we or can we not?
Well, that's a nice one.
This is what people are telling us. So yeah, 90% agree.
Yeah, no, I think the pandemic particularly has shown the enormous value of aircraft tracking data to predict economic trends, because, like, I think pre-pandemic it was really the scheduling data which was looked at, but then very quickly people realized, oh, that doesn't sound right, like it cannot be true. And then they realized airlines report their schedules and they don't update them according to what they fly. There are too many short notice changes and adjustments which cannot be reflected in global scheduling data. And there the ADS-B data or the aircraft tracking data in general came in and like showed a more real picture, especially also as there are so many unscheduled operations still. Like ad hoc cargo is one of the examples, but still there are also a lot of like the recovery flights, which we have obviously seen in the news for month and month from governments chartering airlines to fly home people which are stranded in other parts of the world. And those flights were partly not scheduled. And I think it was important for economic forecastings of countries, of banks, of insurance companies to be able to see those trends still, which then ADS-B data and aircraft tracking data was really the only true source. And I believe that this is then the trend of using that data has come to stay. I think it would be more and more fused, obviously, with the scheduling data together, but it certainly has become like the house data.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's an interesting paper, and I can maybe put it in the chat later, in Nature, where they look at ADS-B data to do nowcasting, to really be, and that's, I think Shai, you mentioned that in the beginning, that the data is real time. So the data is almost immediately there. So it allows you, if you look at the data in real time, to really predict the economy in a much faster rate than if you would wait for I don't know, the different organizations to bring out their predictions and their statistics. And yeah, so that is happening, and it is available, the data. And so in my view, it can have so much value outside of the aviation industry to look at the data and to predict the different economies, and especially when there's major events like the COVID pandemic or like another economic crisis or so on, to do so.
Yeah, I think it's highly correlated with economic activity between countries. Not only passenger travel, but also cargo travel, right? The two are maybe we've seen inversely related in this case, with macro trends affecting upward both of them, potentially at different rates. We're ordering more on the internet than we used to, right? We used to go to the store down the street a lot more than we are. But at the same time, we're also seeing, greater interconnectivity between cities and areas. So
true. And yeah.
And another point on that is like that. I think we had already two massive cases in recent history, where I think aircraft movement has really shown us a lot about economic trends, about cultural trends, about general trends. One powerful one was obviously September 11, and who stopped flying where, and when did they start flying again, and who dared what, and another one was obviously the Icelandic volcano eruption, to also see like what happened. And like I think these were two obviously kind of black swan type of events, maybe not so much the volcano, but I think, but now with the pandemic, it can be really said like that data set has proven its value for the overall global industries around, to predict and see trends, spot trends, analyze data.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I just wanted to bring up this screen on the platform, which is a dedicated page targeted towards doing trend analysis and also doing like the change in trends. So basically what we're doing here is we're comparing two periods. One is in 2020, the beginning of the year, and one is in 2021, the beginning of the year. And you see the different trends here in aircraft activity, and we're still looking at the four engine wide-body aircraft. And basically you can see that there's like a decline between those two same periods 1 year apart of almost 100%, like it's 95.7. But what you can do also is you can take different regions, different airports, different countries, different economic zones, and start filtering on them, then maybe even rank them. And that's what we're doing here. So this is focused on the airport areas around Dubai, Frankfurt. We have London Heathrow, and you see like the change in activity. And you could imagine that you could not just only take aircraft data, but maybe also the maritime data and analyze all those changes over time and see what is mostly impacted. For example, the JFK here is really at the big end of the list, and that's, I think, a general trend that we see in the US. Much less traffic with the big body aircraft. And that's one thing you can do. You can also look at travel between different regions. So for example, if you want to know, like, okay, how is the traffic between London Heathrow and JFK impacted? Then you can build those origin destination matrices, and they basically give you the number of flights between one airport and another airport, but you can also basically use different regions on the map. And here you see the change over time. You see what is most impacted and so on. So that's quite interesting. And then also something I prepared also here is for example, to look at different airlines and see how they differ. And then typically, if you look at like the regional airlines or the country associated airlines, you can see like big differences. Like for example, on the left side, you have British Airways. They almost completely went to not using any of the wide body aircraft anymore. While on the right side, you see Lufthansa case, which they were still using quite a few aircraft. So you can see also there different strategies, different operations. And that's quite interesting to see in the data by comparing over time. So yeah, I think the conclusion is definitely we can use the data for predicting, and there's some scientific papers around this topic also. So Joe, maybe we go to the next one.
Sure. So we've got 2 more hypotheses left. So again, if you do have any questions, please start adding those into the Q&A box now for the end. But the hypothesis 4, so a positive or negative for climate change. The COVID-19 pandemic will not leave a positive impact on climate change. Do you agree, don't agree, or not sure? If you'd like to make your selection now. Again, it's another one that's splitting people's opinion. Okay, a few more seconds, and I'm going to end the poll there. Share the results. So 38% agree, 29% don't agree, and 33% not sure.
Interesting result, yeah.
Yeah. So never underestimate humans' willingness and ability to destroy their planet. Unfortunately, that's what we're seeing from this thing. So I'm not sure either, but I tried to bias myself to voting, and so I voted that this is true. So a lot of people have moved outside of city centers. A lot of people that we know, that we work with, have decided to live in places that are different. And we've also learned as an industry to work remotely better, to be able to have these communications via Zoom and via Google Meets and via all these technology platforms that allow us to better communicate. And so what we're able to do now is communicate more effectively, but you have a lot more people that may need to travel. So I may have to travel to beautiful Stockholm less often, but there's more people like me that will need to travel to a center, to an offsite, to a corporate office to connect on an occasional basis. So that's on the aviation side, but on the consumption side, we've all gotten much more used to consuming things from little packages, from ordering from restaurants, from ordering things online. All this packaging has and cargo and demand for things at your doorstep. I think that's a macro trend that's not going to reverse itself. It's just too darn convenient. And so I don't know how they outweigh each other, but these are all kind of conflicting factors.
I totally agree, especially what we now see that there were 3 major integrators, they're called, DHL Express and their aircraft fleet. You have FedEx and their aircraft fleet, UPS is the aircraft fleet. They are massive airlines when it comes to the operation and the amount of flights they perform. And now there's just the 4th one stepping in, which is Amazon. And like, that's the best example here. Like there is a strong demand to have the next day delivery, have everything in front of your doorstep, which will just lead to more demand. And like, obviously, more things flying will ultimately have a negative impact. And the way to leverage is obviously to use the more efficient aircraft, and that ties back to the question of the 4-engine aircrafts. But still, trunk routes will be there, and like goods will be shipped out of China. And like I said, what we see now with the shortage of toy units on ships, you know, suddenly, you know, even goods which are not as high value are shipped by aircrafts. And especially here, I think looking at the data and being able to spot trends in there is quite interesting.
Right. And yeah, I was wondering, do countries use this type of data to monitor the impact on the environment, like maybe in some sustainability initiative or?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. I think it was in pre-COVID days, it was predominantly big governmental organizations which did that, but I think there will be a way stronger trend to do that on more local environmental reports, down to really regional environmental reports, which like I think will take all data points from whatever is emitting emissions to build really true global models, and to like at the end also put maybe taxation on the models which don't use the most efficient way, and obviously have the biggest share in the emission overall.
All right, cool. Or maybe not cool. So
good from a data use case point of view, obviously not so good from a global environmental point of view. Climate change.
It's probably hard to predict which direction it will go indeed. The next hypothesis is more an abstract one. Joe, it's
yeah. So this is the final one. So rise of machines. As machines are getting smarter, the role of humans will increase. Do you agree, don't agree, or you're not sure? So what's everyone's thoughts on this one? It's another one that has split opinion again, which has been good questions today, or good hypotheses. I'm going to end the poll and share that with you. There we go. So 33% agree, 29% don't agree, and 38% not sure. What are your thoughts on that?
So every time I've worked in the AI field before it was called AI over the last 10 years. And every time you depend on an AI application, there's somebody in a box behind it pulling the trigger on the actual decisions that the AI recommends. This happens at Uber Maps. We had incredibly sophisticated algorithms to detect road changes and in real time detect and fit. Yeah, but it was confirmed, verified, and approved by a human operator. That context and logic is incredibly powerful, that machines can do a great job at synthesizing the data, but allowing that key decision making to humans. And I see that left and right. So that's kind of my prediction. That being said, trivial recommendations, like more and more recommendations are going to be done by computers, but it allows humans to make more sophisticated, more complex, and more impactful decisions and recommendations. And so honestly, the reason why I'm pretty geeked out about visualization and big data visualization is because it allows humans to effectively synthesize that much data and make those decisions, rather than an automatic threshold that's been exceeded and therefore you need to make a decision. But being able to explore the data, use your cognitive ability, and be able to leverage that in intuitive ways is kind of a really big deal as far as leveraging big data for decision making.
Yeah, it's something we also focus on a lot. So we focus a lot on visualization as a company, but also on analytics to assist the user into seeing what she wants to see or needs to see. And typically that's also something that you discover while looking at the data. You discover some new insights, maybe even some new questions that you didn't think of before by looking at the data. And then, of course, because this type of data that we are dealing with is so big and so huge, you really have to assist the user finding the needle in the haystack, finding the summaries, the statistics, the details that are of interest. So that's why we also focus on that. But humans are visual. We all, like, I think there's like a scientific small nice thing to know is that I think 2/3 of the electric activity in our brains is due to the visual system. So we're very visual. Machines are getting very good at being visual to detect patterns and so on. But still, humans can do a lot still. So that's a little bit my view on it. I think it will go hand in hand. I'm a bit unsure which of the two sides of the hypothesis will win. All right. Maybe there's a question I see, Joe, there's someone asks, is there a demo of the xyzt platform? I use the xyzt platform with the Spire data. And just quickly, I'll show you before going into the wrap up. If you go to our website and you register just with your email address, you can log into the platform. And then if you would go to the projects and the shared projects, there's a number of shared projects. There's 2 from Spire, and there's this one that I used during the webinar with the wide body aircraft data that you can explore and analyze yourself and see what it means and what's in the data. And if you have questions about the data, reach out to the Spire folks. If you have questions about the platform, you can reach out to us. So yeah, maybe before going into the Q&A, some takeaways from my side. I think what Spire is doing really, really well is not just providing satellite-based flight data, but they fuse it also with terrestrial data, giving really great coverage. But what is really exciting to me, and I see that in different industries, not just in the aviation industry, but also, for example, in the connected car industry, is that companies are building data as a service platforms around this fused, cleaned up data, so that you can just use a simple API to get your access on the data. And that's really exciting. Like, if you think about the investment being made to launch those satellites, to set up all this infrastructure, and then you just as a developer or as a user, you just have to use a REST API, for example, to access the data. That's so exciting to me, and that brings really new opportunities. And that makes for me really what I think over the last 10 to 20 years, companies invested in, also like Flight Radar 24 and Spire and others, to make this data available to people outside the aviation industry. So the use cases, they range from doing analysis at the airport level, airline level, environmental studies, predicting the economy, and it's really up to you to define the use case. I even read a paper when doing a little bit of research on researchers that were analyzing air traffic data to predict mergers or like between different companies just by looking at the traffic of the private jets. They could predict that certain companies would be acquired by others and use that on the stock market. So there's all types of use cases. Some are maybe a little bit nicer for humanity than others, but the data is there and it's available for analytics. And I hope what we try to do with xyzt is to make it digestible for anyone. Our goal is really that you can just point and click through the data, setting filters, styling the data to find the insights, and then also share it with your stakeholders. So the data is there, the tools are there. I would like to thank Shai, Philippe, also Johan from Spire Aviation was really helpful to enable this little discussion. And I would like to thank you as well. And yeah, please, if you have any questions, we're here to answer them.
We have some questions, so thanks for that, Bart. So let's jump right in now. We've got 15 minutes or so to answer these. So the first one is, considering the current global supply chain and logistics crisis, would it be possible to get insights about global air cargo flow, like routes, cargo hubs, frequency, etc., and visualize cargo movements?
So short answer from Spire Aviation is absolutely, and we have some partners that are doing that. I think we did a press release recently Let me make sure so I don't give away anybody's hand here. Yeah, with TAC index, with TAC index that are doing some pretty interesting cargo analytics. But we are seeing a bunch of people piping our data into some of their decision and software, as well as people leveraging xyzt to help visualize and ask those questions. So in short, yes, that's exactly one of the things that the data can give you. Of course, we don't know, how filled the bellies are of each of these wide body aircraft or each of these narrow body aircraft, and what the going rate is for, for a parcel. But this definitely gives you the analytics and how it's changing between in the flow of goods between regions.
True, and it's not just aviation data. From what I see, maritime data, the data that you also provide is also very instrumental in doing that. Because yeah, lots of the goods are still transported overseas. No, interesting question. Yeah.
Yeah. So Spire, one of the key use cases at Spire Maritime is to evaluate goods from vessels. Where it's interesting because it's to cross a body of water such as one of the big oceans. It takes a month, it takes a while to cross it in an A380 or a 747 or in any modern aircraft. It's like 7 hours, right? It's a totally different scale as far as necessity of tracking and coverage and velocity that the data appears in. But it's potentially just as impactful. So yeah, we have people combining both maritime and aviation, as well as trying to understand the flow of goods and the change in the flow of goods. So thanks for that question.
Great, thanks for that. So the next one is, can we combine the data and the platform to see the flow of passengers to track COVID transmission risks?
It's a good one. It's a good one. And there's also other data sources that are available. For example, like from before COVID with the flu, the flu transmissions, there was like this periodic wave of like how flu migrates throughout the world with the seasons basically. And it's quite interesting to combine those two data sources and leverage them. And indeed, the travel, passenger travel can be a good indication of how things would transmit. Talking a little bit next to aviation, the platform is also being used for people flow tracking, like where you have like a big event and you see people moving around. There with different technologies, can be Bluetooth, can be Wi-Fi, can be vision. You can also track the flow of people, and there you can also do these types of things. For example, in an office space, analyze which office rooms are used most, are used by many people, and put like sort of a risk assessment on those. But I think for aviation, it's the same, and it's very global. So definitely, I don't know, Shai or Philip, if you have a view on that. Do you have any customers using the data for this type of use case?
Yeah, I think there are use cases for that. They're a bit complex because the data sourcing becomes quite. You need to go really deep because there's not a global repository where you can get passenger load factors on an individual flight basis. But I've seen it being simplified by taking average load factors and kind of amount of flights and the seat configuration of the aircraft, and you can get to quite precise predictions. Same for cargo, but of course that involves some expert knowledge to do so. It's not as simple as some other use cases, but it can be done.
Well, I think one of the interesting things about COVID transmission risk is that the reason why governments have a hard time predicting your risk is because they're less focused on any individual's risk. They're looking at the at the population's risk. And if you have a lot of flights coming from the virus originating in Wuhan, right? From Wuhan to a certain place, you can expect that in the place that it goes to, that it would spread. So now it's everywhere, right? But what you're seeing is rates of outbreak in different countries vary. So in Israel, it was really strong controls on movement of people, and then it was vaccines. They were the first vaccines. and you saw what that did to the movement of people within the country. And you can infer what the riskiness is of flights from Ben Gurion Airport to Heathrow and what the contribution is to the London population at the time. Delta spreading is exactly the same thing, right? It was the same thing as the Wuhan spread. Is now, I think it originated from India. And so now you can see the spread of flights and the spread of the virus, and based on transmission risk within each of these countries and each of these cities. Very fascinating. I think one of our partner companies, Satavia, does a pretty good job at double clicking, understanding that, and not specifically around COVID, but that's exactly in their wheelhouse. But yeah, these questions you're asking are exactly the questions that this data can help be a part of solving.
Yep. Great, thanks for that. I think one for you here, Bart. Do you only support ADS-B data?
No. So it's not, and we don't even support specifically ADS-B. It's for us, it's important that it's about location records. It's about things that are moving or being tracked. You need to have the location, the timestamp, and potentially some attributes like the flight level or the flight number. And an identifier that identifies that this little record, this position update, belongs to that flight or belongs to that trip, that car, that person, that device, that container even. And so the platform is agnostic to the data format. You do have to define before pushing data in what the structure of the data is, where to find which column in the data. But it's open to any data. And in the platform, you will see the example projects. There's a project with maritime AIS data, ADS-B aviation data, and there's connected car GPS data as well, as an example.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, thanks for that. Next one is, do you provide any custom analytics for ADS-B data? For example, air traffic coefficient per each airspace based on the user's conditions?
Yeah, very good question. And I can see, like, if you're in the aviation industry and doing traffic analysis, those can be quite important. In the platform, for now, we've kept the different components and the different filters and blocks generic, but you can achieve what you described there. But you will have to define, you will have to load the airspaces, you will have to define the filters and so on. So, but it is possible. Of course, if you're like, if the use case is to in real time monitor the airspaces and maybe allocate the controllers and so on, that's not what the platform is meant for. There's like solutions built by ANSPs and so on for that. But it's really about analyzing the history of data in our platform. I hope that answers your questions, and otherwise we can go on a meeting or so to go into more detail.
The next one, is it possible to have historical data of aircrafts that landed or took off at a particular airport, and for how long is it available?
Yes.
Is that type of information available?
Yes, going back several years, we have historical data, and that's actually a meaningful use case that people use the data for, is to do some analysis over time, going backwards, not just going forwards.
Awesome, great, thank you. And then these three are from the same person here. I don't know whether this is included in the data, but they're saying that they're working with a national security agency, and they would like to get some advanced passenger information for flights. I assume that is not part of your remit, and they're asking where they could get that kind of information available. And then as a follow-on from that, they're asking, can aviation authorities track the maintenance history of aircraft using some of the data of yours? So
to go to the first question, that is private data, like that's difficult to obtain. Like if you're national organization and related to Civil Aviation Authority and Border Protection and Border Security units, I think that data is accessible to you, but otherwise that data is not public domain data in any way. The other question, yeah, that is possible, though that is quite a bit more advanced, but you will see when an aircraft lands somewhere and didn't do a usual turnaround for the aircraft type, and then you would know either the aircraft had an overnight stop there or it had maintenance sessions there. And then if you just browse a bit around, you will know like where are the major maintenance hubs for aircraft and what are the service providers there. You could kind of narrow it down to a pretty precise way to predict when aircraft have been maintenance. That can be done on historic data, so you can run it through years of data if you have the time, as it probably will take some compute time, but yeah, it's possible.
Great, okay, and then I think also this one's similar to the answer that you gave here about the, do you have access to the aviation cargo manifest? And again, I think that's probably proprietary to the airlines, isn't it?
Exactly, that's airline operation data, which is not shared.
So one of the themes here is looking for adjacent data, and somebody asked about custom analytics for ADS-B data. So we absolutely work with customers for exploring new use cases, and oftentimes we can help acquire third-party data sets that help complete that picture. I am super keen on understanding the diversity and going deeper into the use cases that we've identified. And so, yeah, we have an awesome API, but if there's questions that the API on its own doesn't solve, or you need help solving, reach out, Aviation at Spire. If nothing else, we'll have an interesting conversation about, you know, the limitations of the data or limitations of third-party data, or point you in the right direction. And so for the person asking about the national security use case, like reach out. I think Philip's pretty clever about what the sources of data are that might help complete a picture, even if it doesn't have every person's passport number on it, right?
Exactly, and the fun thing is, like, nowadays, you know, you can do so much with predictions, take assumptions, run them through machine learnings on some sample reference data, and you probably get quite far.
Okay, I think the last few questions that we have here, if people were wanting to subscribe, sort of how does the partnership work together, and do you have to go to the individual organizations, or people can explain a bit about that?
Yeah, yeah, I guess you can contact us or Spire. Our platform is 30 days free, so you can just go online and start using it. So that's the lowest barrier that we could put there, and you will see the sample data in the platform, so it will be quite easy to start working with the Spire data. But definitely reach out to either of us. We have a partnership going on, but indeed you're going to be licensing two separate things, like on the one hand the data, and on the other hand the platform.
One of the goals that I have for my group and for the team and for the company is to be easy to do business with. So reach out to Bart, reach out to me, reach out to either of these email addresses, and we'll help facilitate to make it as simple as possible. So you don't have to go to two different stores, two different shops. The data sings when it's employed in such a platform. I really want it to sing. Let's see some harmonies. Wait, that was so lame. I'm sorry.
Awesome. And then the final one, about the subscription models, is it one-time payments? Is it monthly fees? How do you both operate? So
historical data dumps are oftentimes one-time payments. For real-time tracking, of course, it's an ongoing thing. Some people have a need for historical data going back, and they have a project that lasts duration. We're pretty good about payment terms and making it simple to, again, being easy to do business with, right?
Yeah, same for us. It's a subscription. It's a subscription-based scheme. We have different tiers, so depending on the needs that you have, the amount of data, the amount of users, there's different tiers, but they're all subscription-based.
All right, perfect. Okay, right, it is 4 o'clock. So unless anyone else has any other questions that they'd like to get into the chat box, or any other comments or thoughts from the panel?
No, I would like to thank
it's
everyone.
been fun. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks a lot, guys. That was great.
It's a little bit of a different format there, but I think a lot more sort of interactive and interesting for the people that are joining. So I'd like to say thank you to everyone that has joined us today. If you do have any questions you think of, then by all means reach out to us. We will send out the follow-up emails with the links to the recordings in there very shortly, within the next 24 hours. So yeah, thank you very much for joining, Shai and Philip. Thank you very much for taking part in this is really appreciated. And I'd like to wish you all a very good rest of your day, and yeah, hopefully see you on our next webinar.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you very much,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.
Bye.